There's been a lot of similar movies coming out recently. Remakes like Mean Girls and Nosferatu, and sequels like Smile and Gladiator. But none of these movies really had the chance to be original, seeing as they're made off an already existing IP. So what about a movie like Opus? A new and original screenplay which would eventually get picked up by Neon, but once released, quickly forgotten about and left behind as a quote, copy of The Menu. There's a lot of movies that fall into the same category, but some of the standouts are Get Out, Midsommar, The Menu, and Opus. So yes, these movies all have plots that when deconstructed look very similar, usually including a cult or overbearing presence that our protagonist slowly uncovers and then must find a way to escape. Let's start with the first one. Get Out 2017 follows Chris Washington, played by Daniel Kaluuya, as he and his girlfriend Rose, Allison Williams, go on a trip to meet her parents for the first time. From the moment he arrives, he just has this off feeling, starting with the cop, and finally confirms his suspicions when looking through Rose's old box of photos and realizes that this family has been abducting people. He tries to leave until he is captured and sedated, but eventually he does get the upper hand and makes it out alive. Alright, so after going through the main plot points, we can see the specific beats the movie hits. Establish a character with some sort of ailment or issue, set a quote call to action, whether it be family, work, or leisurely related, cue random scenes that allude to the weirdness but never tell you too much until they do, which leads to the quote I want to leave scene, which can be spoken out loud or quiet and inconspicuous. There's usually an entrapment of some sort until our protagonist miraculously escapes. Once we have this outline to work with, we can basically plug it into any of the movies I mentioned. In Midsommar, Danny, Florence Pugh, joins a cult without knowing, wants to leave, gets chosen to be the one survivor, and at that point is too indoctrinated to do anything about it, essentially escaping. So if all these movies fall into these same formulas, it begs the question of why Get Out is so acclaimed while Opus was shoved off as a copy. The answer is much simpler than it seems. When you look at films that don't really have much of a plot, such as Synecdoche, New York, Beau is Afraid, and I'm Thinking of Ending Things, through basic story lens, these can all be clumped together as the same type of movie, a hey, if you like this one, you're sure to like this one scenario. But these films make it much more apparent that even with similar story structure and themes, they are vastly different, usually following the story of someone rather than actually being with the protagonist. Specifically, in these examples at least, having a male lead who we see a glimpse into their life until their usually implied death. The only issue is from face value, you can't exactly use the same rinse and repeat format, but that's only because these stories are non-linear. For example, instead of going start to finish and getting all our beats, we really only figure out the call to action or reason for the story at the end. So if we just switch that around, we can use the structure. For example, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. In this movie, we follow Jake, played by Jesse Plemons, alongside Jessie Buckley, a woman of many names, but I'll call her Lucy for the sake of this video. The movie takes place from the perspective of Lucy. Her and her boyfriend Jake are about to take a trip to meet his parents. Remind you of something? We're in Lucy's head most of this movie, hearing her thoughts and how she really wishes she wasn't going on this trip. They reach his parents' house and everything has a very dreamlike feel. It goes from relatively normal to nightmarish as time doesn't seem to be moving linearly, with people's ages shifting randomly. Lucy the whole time mentions wanting to leave, but just being brushed off by her boyfriend Jake. When they eventually leave, Jake makes a last-minute left turn into his old high school. He eventually leaves the car, and Lucy, after no sign of him returning, ventures off to find him. The movie completely switches tones and becomes a very well choreographed dance, then a play of Oklahoma, mentioned previously in the movie constantly. Then we find out what we just watched, the last fleeting memories of a dying high school janitor, reminiscing on what could have been, named Jake. These movies have a different pattern, but can still be applied to the same structure. Establish a character with some sort of ailment or issue, just as before, but leave the actual call to action until the end of the movie. Instead, just cue up some scenes that allude to where we will end up, or how the movie will tie together. The I want to leave scene can be any time in the movie when the absurdism reaches a point of no return, like when the movie turns to choreographed dance, or in Beau is Afraid when he finds his father in the attic. And then, instead of whoever we have been following this whole time escaping, it usually ends in their demise. But when you hear people bring up "I'm thinking of ending things," they don't normally say it's a copy of anything. They applaud its creativity and independence. But this same idea can be applied to any genre of movies. Take the plot of most slashers, where a group of friends go to a new location, die off one by one while the main characters slowly unravel the mystery until we're left with our quote, final girl, who is usually the only one who makes it out. The difference is that with horror and slasher films, all these elements are expected by the audience. You don't go into an obvious Friday the 13th ripoff and get upset when the Friday the 13th happens, because that is not why you went to that movie. But with the genre of movies that Opus, Get Out, and Midsommar fall into, the audience usually goes in expecting something new, and while the movies still follow the same framework, it is easy to see why some of these movies are acclaimed higher than others. To put it simply, the issues really just stem from bad writing and direction. Take The Menu. That movie follows essentially the same beats and tone from Get Out, replacing a few key themes, but doesn't get called a copy or said to be unoriginal, because the writing is smart and quick. It keeps you on your toes, and even if you saw the twist coming, it still felt earned. This is why, with Opus, many audience members felt that the big twist ending they had been anticipating for the entire movie no longer felt earned or new, because even though their expectations of the plot itself were met, they didn't find that anything new or interesting was really done. And when you add on top all the exposition dumps and tone switches, the movie just becomes an unpleasant watch. When the only real fatal flaw is the cop-out ending rather than the plot similarities as a whole, you realize that with better writing and direction, these same ideas and settings could have been unchanged, and still made into a movie that feels cohesive and satisfying, instead of being shoved to the side as a copy. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe. Alright, bye now.